I thought we'd start off by perhaps being not so controversial, but providing a little bit of background here. You know, over human history, there's been sort of like four main eras of the way we work, the way humans work. You know, there was a few million years of, or up to 1 million years of the hunter-gatherers. We had a few 100,000 years of agricultural era. We've had a few thousand years in the industrial age, or a few hundred years, I should say, and then a few decades in the information age. But now there's a few things happening that have come together to make us do things differently and actually create some systems that we couldn't otherwise do and meet some customer demands that we just couldn't imagine in the past. So this list of some of those things, as you think through all those, a lot of those things we all sort of know about, but they're now becoming available and usable in a format that we can both consume, we can orchestrate, and we can afford. I don't need to now go out and buy a mainframe computer to do artificial intelligence. I can consume some service just to having something where a fairly small neural network right through to having something like a visual recognition service consumed easily, readily available, and I can consume and integrate that into an overall solution. Obviously, mobile is ubiquitous. Everything's mobile now. We think of everything as a service. We orchestrate, we collaborate, we integrate basically everything as a service nowadays, and they're all available to us. IoT, we'll talk about a bit more about that in future, this slide, but that's bringing the physical world into our digital world. And one of the points here, this idea that we can now process lots of data in real time and make cognitive decisions about that data before it even hits some sort of storage device. Now that's a pretty cool idea, and we're starting to play with ideas around, well, how do I use an AI engine to drive cognitive processes and make some inference about what's going on in a major network before it even gets stored anywhere, rather than the idea of tossing it in the bucket and a few days later we think about things. But I suppose the one point that's emerging that's making this world different is the fact that throughout history, all our tools are being passive. Whether we think of a flint axe in the hunter-gatherer age or a supercomputer today, they respond to questions that we ask of them. They operate based on our interaction, and that's the big change. And that's where we're talking about this concept of a new age where our tools are no longer passive. Right, and this is the first time in human history that any tool that humans have available to them to do their jobs is no longer passive. It can be cognitive, it can be, so it can infer stuff. It's generative, it has, intuition, the concept of intuition. We can collaborate with IT now, and it can do things that it's good at. And it can... And humans can work. So there's a lot of terms around people talking about artificial intelligence world, the augmented intelligence world era, but we're now at the dawn of an era where, for the first time in human history, our tools are no longer passive. And that's pretty exciting to me. I'm towards the end of my career, but as I talk to the younger guys in Deloitte Digital, you sit there and say the opportunities for that are absolutely amazing. But the challenge is, in that context, well, how do we start to build stuff? How do we think about these things? And how do we include these sorts of concepts into our platforms and frameworks and the channels that we build? So I'll hand over to Saul to talk a bit more about that side of it.
Thanks, Ken. So yes, as our tools become more sophisticated and more collaborative, we need to learn how to use them more effectively. And it used to be not so long ago, a platform was an operating system. And that word is now broadening out in its meaning. And more people that we work with, more and more enterprises are taking a platform approach to their business. So they're building an operating system for their business, an operating system for their bank, or an operating system for their utility, or an operating system for their university. So this platform approach is a really important change in the way that we architect our businesses and our systems. We're decoupling the core data and the core functionality from the channels and the innovation platforms that we need to change on a very rapid basis. This is all about this digital transformation thing that we've been hearing about this morning. Digital transformation kind of means you've got to change faster and be more agile, and platform architecture is really the way you do that. One of the ways that a platform architecture helps is that it separates core functionality and data from channels. And channels are the things that are proliferating at a faster rate. Our first channel, kind of, was the internet, the World Wide Web. And we had web apps in 2005, Ajax came along, and our web pages started calling home to get data interactively. And we typically built those web apps as big, monolithic, vertically integrated architectures that were hard to change. Mobile apps came along as the next channel, and we kind of did the same thing, but learned that that's not a sustainable way to build our systems. And as we start to get more and more channels arriving to affect our businesses, to enable our businesses, more and more businesses are taking that platform approach. So IoT is a new channel that's emerging now, particularly in the utilities area. Voice is a channel that's really going to take off in the near future. And we've got other things like customer data rights, leading into open banking and open data for utilities. Customer data is another channel that our businesses are going to have to deal with. So platforms are a way that we can organize our architecture to deal with the proliferation of new and unexpected channels that are coming along. Platforms are also a way that we can start to integrate and compose these new tools and new capabilities into new business offerings. So as Ken mentioned, we've got new tools which are available effectively for free, almost for free. Things like AI and machine learning, big data capabilities, which you don't install on your machine with a floppy disk. You consume them as services from somewhere in the cloud. And more, the platforms that we build for our businesses are integration platforms. So a guy named Larry Keeley wrote a book on 10 types of innovation, where he looked at the way that modern enterprises innovate and all of the different models that are there. And one of the things that he says in that book is that modern innovation is more about elegant integration than invention. We're not necessarily inventing new capabilities, but we're composing them into new services and new offerings. So we've been working with platforms for several years now, and we've found a number of benefits that come from them. Platforms abstract away the complexity. As I said, they decouple the front end, the channels, from the back end, and the back end is often a composition of services that we consume from the cloud. Platforms deliver a really important thing to our developers, and that is autonomy. I think a lot of the benefits that arrive from the new tools we're using, from Agile, from continuous delivery, from microservices, are all about giving developers autonomy, the tools, the data, and the permission to do the things they need to do. So platforms are increasingly being used as a sandbox for developing new ideas and for trying new products and services. We've been on the container journey for about 5 years now at Deloitte, and we've learned a lot as we've gone through that journey and as the tools have matured around us. And when OpenShift 3 came out, that really answered a lot of the questions that we had around how you managed and orchestrated containers and how you scaled out a container-based ecosystem. So OpenShift has become our platform of choice for the services that we deliver and for the innovation projects that we do internally. Really, our developers, it provides a consistent developer experience across on-premise, across multiple clouds, and it introduces them to the power of Git push, which is like the most powerful command that a developer can do these days. Now I'll hand back to Ken, who's going to talk about some of the ways that we've been using the platforms and integrating with things to extend the digital arena into the physical world.
Thanks very much. So I'll make the assumption that most of you, know what Internet of Things is and what IoT is, so I won't get into that. But as you start to think about those platforms that Saul talked about, and we start then to extend that out into the physical world, and we start to integrate devices that sense the physical world and then integrate that into our digital world, we start to extend our view of what a solution might look like. And so as we started to play with this in Deloitte and start to think about, well, how do we do this? We go along to a lot of our clients who are starting to play in this space. Their executives have no idea what these tech guys are doing and how this IoT thing may impact their business. It's just it's a foreign concept, and the tech guys are struggling to actually articulate how might this actually change their business and in fact transform their business. So now, rather than just those platforms that we've traditionally had, we've got to integrate now and take consideration of devices, all sorts of devices. We're doing a project at the moment where Deloitte in Melbourne, the Deloitte office in Melbourne, are moving to a new building in a couple of years' time, and it's currently being built. So we're working with the architects and the developers to turn that into a smart building, and thinking through what are the platforms we need to be able to create a truly smart building, and that's everything from what most people think of a smart building around energy efficiency and those sorts of things, but also being able to track desks, equipment in and out. How do we create a flexible working environment where we can actually move resources around in that office, and we actually know where they all are. We know how they're being used, so that when someone sits on a chair, that we know the consumption rate of those assets around the entire office. How do we create an environment where people want to work there, feel comfortable working there, and want to be creative in that environment? So we're actually thinking about, well, what are the platforms and what are the devices and what are the frameworks we need to actually build something like that. We've done more with water utilities. We're doing one with a big government agency at the moment where we're sort of sitting there going, well, if these fuel lines leak, there's some pristine water reserves next door. How do we make sure that those things aren't polluted? And so forth. So we're now thinking about how does all that come together, and it's in an environment where communication often is not given, is not easy, and we need to bring that into the thing. To make it even a little bit more difficult is that, here's a quote from Mark Weiser, who was the chief engineer at Xerox, father of sort of distributed computing, that these things need to become ubiquitous. They need to become invisible. It's just the way the system works. People don't know why it works this way. They don't need to understand how it works. They just know that they're getting a really good experience in the things. And so we're building artificial intelligence into all sorts of things to make that experience more personalised and more invisible. So we decide. So you sit there and go, right. We have reasonable sized problems dealing with corporate IT and corporate solutions. Now we're going to connect, 2 million homes to my IT environment, or something like that, or in a Deloitte sense, every chair and every desk. So where do we start? Where do we start to think about how we build one of these things? There's not 10 years of experience out there to say let's ask them. So we started sitting there and going, well, let's let's prototype some stuff. Let's learn some things. Let's make some investigations, because we've seen some clients where they've started in their planned cycle saying we've got to define a device first. So they've gone and designed the Rolls-Royce sensing device of best thing known to mankind that does everything, as well as probably turn your coffee pot on in the morning. And yet, when you start to go through the whole cycle, the device was not really the most critical part of the solution. Comms was the most critical part of that solution. The fact that you had a Rolls-Royce connected to a piece of string didn't make the solution particularly useful. So what we started doing is saying, well, how do we learn? How do we play? How do we think about these things so that we can start to know what's important, where to start, where to go, and so forth. So we thought, let's create some prototypes. Let's explore, let's investigate, let's test, learn, communicate. It's very similar to one of the slides that Marco talked about. And let's do this in an environment where we can actually all learn together. And the business can learn together, and we can learn what are the pitfalls, what are the mistakes. Let's fail quickly if it's not going to work, and so forth. So we decided at one stage, let's build a little model of a water distribution network. And this was a fairly modest start. Let's understand, let's build a little model with some pumps and valves and sensors, connect it to an IoT platform in the cloud. Let's put some artificial intelligence in there to see what we can do about how we might be able to use sensors to predict leaks in real time so that we can isolate those leaks and do stuff like that. Where does the AI level sit in the stack of the architecture stack and so forth? And let's start learning some things around this. So I went to my bosses and said, we want to do some of this stuff, can I get some budget? And this was just before Christmas last year, and didn't get a very good response. All right. Yeah, we're a consulting firm, we don't do plumbing. So if you look at the skills matrix in Deloitte, you'll notice there's one person who has the skill of plumbing on the Deloitte skills matrix. So I'm waiting for the day someone rings me up and says, your skill on the skills matrix says plumbing, can you help me out? But anyway, so what we did, a grievance got there, said, right, we could have gone off and found a little room somewhere, built this thing, and come out and said, well, look what we've done. So we found the most visible space in the office, a big desk, a big table, right next to the table tennis table, the foosball table, and the kitchen. The most publicly used part of the building. And we started building some stuff. And it was just technology stuff. People were coming up to us saying, what are you doing? And it was just before Christmas, so my initial reaction to people was, well, we're building a still. And they sort of looked at me and go, well, it's just before Christmas, we thought we'd make some moonshine for the Christmas party. And then until half of them realised I was joking, other half didn't realise I was joking, walked off scratching their heads. And we started making this thing. And we started to learn a lot. We learned a lot about comms. When some mornings you come in and you find that some of the devices are off just for some unknown reason are not communicating. And you sit there and think, well, if I've got 2 million homes in a water utility, and and 1,000 of them are off one morning, you want to know about that. So how do you manage that? How do you find out about it? How do you design for that? And so forth. So we started doing this. So then I went to one of the creative guys and said, can I put a little bit of a creative background under the pipes to make it look pretty? And he came back and said, oh, I can do something better than that. And it's like, well, how do I communicate the knowledge that I've learned from building that prototype and communicate that to my executive, or the executive of water utility, for instance, to understand what this IoT thing is and how it's a business. A bunch of pipes and a whole pile of sensors and a whole pile of like service diagrams to an executive is meaningless stuff, even though it sort of looks cool because I've got water flowing through pipes. So what we did, we got there and we extended our little prototype. We happened to have interior design group, part of Deloitte Digital. They design banks of the future and stuff, so we could merge the digital and physical world. So those guys were able to design houses and a landscape. And then we've got our animation, our video guys who could do video editing and all that sort of stuff. We've got emerging tech guys who do game engine design and so forth and know how to do projections on buildings and all sorts of cool stuff like that. We've got our integration guys who know how to integrate all this stuff together. We've got our tech guys who understand, sensors and valves. And we created this model where it is a smart projection that projects onto a landscape where we've got a purely white model. All the colours on this is fully projected, which projects in real time onto the model, and underneath the model is my little pipes and valves, which both sides of the thing respond to tell you what's going on in the physical model. And we're now able to have discussions with senior execs around what this IoT stuff is, and also understand what are the problems, where are the challenges and some of the benefits of going with this. So we've got a little video that goes for just over a minute to give you a bit more of a view of what this prototype looks like.
Water is Earth's most precious resource. Yet we use a distribution system that hasn't dramatically changed in thousands of years, and an infrastructure created decades ago. Today, up to 20% of all water in this system is lost in leaks. So, what if this network, buried beneath our feet, was completely transparent? Measured, monitored and metered in real time. What if the network could detect leaks, automatically reroute water and send assistance all by itself, fixing problems before they are problems? What if this network could save money and, more importantly, water? Well, it can. How do we know? Because we've already built one. The H2.0 Smart Water Network. From ideation to realization. Created by Deloitte Digital.
So what that gives you an idea of, how immersive and how engaging a prototype can be to start to articulate some of the things. And all of those interactions on that slide, on that video, are all projected onto a pure white modelled background. So just to give you a feel for what that looked like. And it's interesting when we talk about everything as a service and this world, where we have the architectural layer, which is the building, the landscape, sitting over the physical IoT network, which was talking out to a cloud IoT network. And if you can get comms from inside the Deloitte network out to an IoT network, you can solve any network problem known to mankind. And then we've got a games engine sitting in the roof of this thing, driving the interaction. And as Sol talked about new channels, well, one of the new channels to the IoT platform is a games engine. So the actual games engine was sitting there listening to the IoT network and sitting there going, water to house 1 just got turned on because I can see flow going through the flow meter. I'll turn on the video interaction for that house and I'll start projecting the flow rates onto the video. Right, so it is actually part of the full integration of the flow meter. So that's gives you an idea of how, as you start to build stuff into a service and all these services, you start to orchestrate them in all sorts of cool ways. So there were some lessons learned about this. It was all about communication, right? This is all about communication, both in the network itself, when you find that devices aren't there. How do I monitor? How do I make sure things are connected? How sure they're secure, and so forth? All really important. But also communication as a prototype as to how do you articulate what is the problem you're trying to solve and how this is going to help you. You need to monitor. Devices are less critical than we thought. And we were able to move artificial intelligence higher up in the stack than we thought, so that we can it sits right under the IoT layer so that we can actually infer and make decisions. You know, we can flick a valve on this thing and introduce a leak, and we can find where that leak was. One of the things in that video, you'll see an animation of a drone. We actually got a drone and we integrated into the IoT platform and got it to fly out, and then we discovered that Deloitte don't allow you to fly drones in their reception for some odd reason. We just couldn't get that one past security, so we had to animate it for the video. But you know, we now have a view of how this will enable greater value to customers, both from a water perspective, but from people around IoT. We've had banks look at this and then start to rethink how they might do stuff. And we've been asked, we're doing some work around trying to prototype and think through some strategies for one of the big government agencies, and you know, integrating out to SAP, as well as I say, you know, monitoring, you know, environmental wetlands, all in an environment, trying to figure out what's important and how you do this. So I think we're down to our last slide, where we're going to sum up some of the sort of final words around.
Just in time for morning tea.
Yes, that's right.
So basically, I think some of our takeaways are innovation is really today more about elegant integration than inventing specific new things. It's important to have an environment where you can iterate, try, fail, learn towards a solution using prototypes and models. And as H2.0 shows, increasingly those prototypes and models can be physical prototypes and models. And that the way that we've adopted platforms and everything as a service really takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting. You don't have to build the whole stack from the hardware up. You can leverage the top surface of the platform to really get a lot of productivity benefits in your endeavors, and to provide a safe place for your developers to work and to learn.
Also, taking the IoT learnings hat, you know, IoT specifically, it's more about than just connecting services and devices. It's about, you know, IoT being part of an ecosystem of services, of artificial intelligence, of all of these sorts of fast data and so forth, and including those in the way you think about the broader vision of your architecture. Getting a device to talk to a network and send some data up to an IoT platform is relatively easy to do. Anybody can do that. You just need a Raspberry Pi or a device and you're up and running. I suppose one of the lessons learnt from this is don't dive down the first technical hole you find, because it mightn't be the right technical hole. You know, let's play across the field, see how we go first, and find which holes are. Prototype, test, learn, iterate, and have a bit of fun. You know, some of this is about being going a little rogue. Because when we started on this, you know, our firm had no idea what, you know, we don't build stuff like this. So we went a little rogue, you know, with respect, and had a bit of fun with it. And the reaction we've got is people now get their head around this sort of approach to playing, to prototyping, to testing, and to learning. So that's our presentation today. Thank you very much for your...
Okay, thank you.